Yeah, nice to see you all here. And today I want to talk a little bit about Tycho and especially Tycho 4 changes. So the very first thing is, what is Tycho? This is maybe not that obvious as we think, because Tycho has many different phases. Tycho is a Maven core extension. That means it can replace or alter the behavior of Maven itself. And Tycho is also a Maven extension plugin. That means it can interact with the running build. And also Tycho is a set of Maven modules. That's something you usually configure in your POM XML actually. Yeah, and all these things are made to automate PDE, metadata, and make your build as easy as possible. Because what we don't want is that we need to repeat everything for the build and for the IDE. So if we have something in the IDE working, it should work just in the build. I don't want to configure anything special just for the build tool, because most of the time I'm a developer and I have no clue about build tools, and I most of the time don't want to learn about them. So if it works in the IDE, it should work in Tycho. That's the most important part. So if you find something that is not working that way, please open a bug. So what Tycho does. Tycho converts your PDE metadata produced into something that Maven can understand, because by default, Maven has no clue about manifests or features or something like that. And another important part is, of course, that I want something that is produced by the Maven build converted into something that is later also be understood by PDE. And that's for the history, it was the main point of Tycho, but now we have also extended this beyond the limit of PDE. It also supports BND and as well OSGI in general. So it allows you also to mix plain Maven artifacts with Tycho builds, and so you can choose what is the best thing to build your item and integrate it with Maven and PDE later on. So let's dive into some details, and one important part to understand is the target platform. And this is maybe something you also know from PDE. There's also something called a target platform state, and so Tycho uses a similar concept. And for this purpose, all reactor projects are of course included, so you can access of course everything that is in your build. And maybe you have defined a target platform definition file that you're using in your IDE, and Tycho is also reading this one and transform it in something that can be used in the Maven build. You can, of course, also use Maven repository references. That is something that don't work in PDE, but is sometimes useful, because if you have a repository that is only relevant for your build because you are creating a special project, for example, just J is an example that is usually only required for building the project and packaging a JVM with your project, so you don't need it in PDE, and then you can just define it as a repository reference. And also, of course, POM dependencies, and they are optionally wrapped as a bundle, so this opens you also to the Maven world, so you are not only restricted to only using targets or reactor projects. And another important part, and what is changed in Tycho 4, is that how the dependency resolution works. Before it was that all projects and all dependencies are resolved before anything in the build happens. So maybe if you have used Tycho before, you know that you start the build and then it stops, nothing happens, and you probably see some download messages, and then it starts the build and there's a compile error all again. This is split now in Tycho here so that we say the projects itself are only analyzed. So the manifests, the features, products, BND files, category files, and we only use a very limited set of requirements and capabilities that only describes the relations between the projects you are building. And this data is then used to compute an initial build order, and then the build can start much, much faster and, of course, fail faster. In the second phase, that is when the project is actually scheduled for execution. So if you execute the build with the parallel builder, then it can happen that some projects are building longer, some projects are building faster, and this computation is parallelized in that way, and then you can make it that your build is even faster, because while the one big project is resolving and building, many more smaller projects can be built. And this result is then passed to the OSGI resolver to compute the final dependency wires, and this is then actually used for compilation. So if you probably know Maven or Tycho, then you might think, okay, wait, every Maven module must have a POM XML, and I have to write some stuff in here, and I don't need this for the IDE. So is this really dry? And that's where I want to hand over to Gilles to explain another feature that can greatly simplify this, that is the pomless build.
Pardon? Exactly. Who has not heard of pomless build yet? Okay, this is for you. Well, I mean, I keep it simple. Basically, it's a structured build layout where you put your build items, build artifacts into specified or specified folders. Tycho can then derive all necessary information to create all the data required to execute the build from the location. And additionally, you have to put the extension XML file into the .maven folder. This is a typical layout you may choose. There are different layouts for your folders. You have many options here. Basically, the idea is to keep it simple, have some sort of convention, and avoid all too much configuration. So still, in case you are wondering, all right, I'd like to migrate, you don't have to do the big bang thing. You can, for instance, start with the bundles, put them in the folder, use the pomless feature here. But in case you have, let's say, complicated or bigger changes in the POM files, more execution commands, whatever, you can keep those, and Tycho will always prefer the POM file over a non-existing POM file. So additionally, you also can define the group ID, which usually is derived from the master POM, but in case you have complicated enterprise structure, whatever, you can define the group ID by adding these properties to the build.properties file. And you also can, I mean, this is very specialized, have a more structured hierarchy of folders, and then you need to specify the group ID and artifact ID, because Tycho extracts the artifact ID from the folder name of the bundle, for instance. So benefits, I'd say, less POM files, less creativity of developers doing weird stuff. I mean, you have very much less files to maintain. This is obvious. I find personally the module section in a big project quite cumbersome to maintain. I mean, adding bundles, removing bundles, keep this module section always on par with the actual workspace. This usually, I think most create some sort of shell script or tools and integrate this in the pre-build phase where the module section is generated or something like this. This all goes easy and all goes away. So another thing Christoph pointed out, if you use pomless, you will benefit from updates in Tycho easily and don't have to do any migration stuff because it's all in there and you benefit from it. 1 second. Okay, testing. Who doesn't write any tests at all? All right, good boy. Who uses bundles to store the test cases, the test classes? Bundles, okay. Who uses the fragments? That was the same, right. So, yeah, here's maybe some ideas I will dive into. We will have to have a look now at how to test your application with Tycho or in a Tycho build. So what you all know, I guess, for plain JUnit tests, you use the Maven Surefire plugin. This executes your plain unit test, no association to OSGI, anything like this. And what you can do, you can add this class bus entry and add another simple source folder to your bundle and put the test there. So, I mean, for some reason, we separate the test code from the production code because we don't want to deploy the test code and so forth. But with this, it's not necessarily needed, and you can keep the things closer together. And PDE will treat this folder as a source folder and exclude it from an export. And if PDE does it, Tycho does it too. So, but yeah, for more complex testing, I mean, we are in a plugin world, in a bundle world. It's not everything so simple. We probably need more access to the actual Eclipse platform. So we are using the Tycho Surefire plugin, which is probably the same as run as JUnit plugin test in the IDE. And what's new is you don't have to use the package directive to say Eclipse test plugin in order to be able to use this Tycho Surefire plugin. You can now, you do not have to use fragments. I mean, you still, if you want to do whatever floats your boat, but you can now also use it in the Eclipse plugin context. So this reduces limits, I'd say. Yeah. So for those tests, usually you have some more complex ramp up, I guess. So the Tycho Surefire plugin adheres to the Maven failsafe paradigm. This is pretty helpful because in case during the test execution something fails, it could happen that the actual Maven plugin crashes. And this would crash the build and, yeah, in worst case, maybe the agent, I don't know. But now the Surefire plugin, the Tycho Surefire plugin adheres to the failsafe paradigm, which means the tests are executed so they can safely fail without destroying the actual build. And you have these goals, the pre-integration, post-integration for a more sophisticated ramp-up and cleanup. Yeah. So basically, to sum it up, you still can use the classic way, have your separate bundles, stay there, but in case you want to reconsider this layout or structure, we recommend to use the new way, as well as not forced to use fragments. You can use Eclipse plugins as well, which simply gives you more options, or adhere to the other two things. So, and I think now we are going to the B&D testing, yeah?
Right. One new thing in Tycho 4 is that we also support B&D tooling from Tycho builds, and especially if you never have used B&D before, you can still take a look at the B&D testing framework, because this is similar to what we have with plugin tests, but is a little bit more flexible and easy to use if you're using some external libraries. For example, the OSGI testing framework is much better integrated here in this case. And this is very comfortable to use. You can simply use some nice annotations to collect your services, and that's something with classical JUnit plugin tests in PDE is a little bit hard to do, and you have a lot of helper classes to fetch services or something like that. But if you're using BND workspaces, of course, then you can now also build these with Tycho, and you just need to enable the Tycho build extension, run Maven install, and this is completely pomless. So you don't need any configuration file. It will extract everything from the BND workspace. So then look into some other things that are changed. One question, who is using PDE RP tools? Or who knows what it is? Better, okay, all right, I can feel your pain. But the good news is that PDE RP tools are now directly supported in Tycho as well, so it is much easier to set up, it is much faster, and so if you still like to use it or are forced to use it for some reason, then this is now simplified and hopefully much more stable than before. One new thing is the Tycho baseline plugin. What I want to suggest to everyone that is currently not doing any baselining, because it supports true and comprehensive semantic versioning support. Anyone know what semantic versioning means? Great. So actually it's about that you can read from the version what might have changed from the consumer side. So we all know new major version means many things has broken. Probably minor version means slightly change, and micro maybe just some bug fixes. So we are often safe to just upgrade. So how does it work? It analyzes a baseline plugin and compares it with your current build artifact. And especially the exported packages are checked for incompatibilities, and that is something that, for example, the PDE IP tools do not support. They always work on the bundle version. And yeah, working on exported packages for API is much more flexible. Also, manifest headers and resources as well are checked, and for those using BND, you might find this something similar. So Tycho is using BND in the background for this, but has a little bit nicer output here and some enhancement, especially for the Eclipse and Tycho ecosystem. And yeah, in the end, you see there's a problem. You get a description what has changed and how it is qualified. For example, in this case, this is classified as a minor change, and then you are suggested to increase your version from 1 to 1.1. What also is possible that you can baseline check Eclipse features. That's something BND currently not support, and that's not so surprising because it is not an OSGI standard. It's completely Eclipse. So we using the Eclipse project recommendations. I think most of you have read this already in the committers handbook and are very familiar with this. But for those others, I will just summarize this a bit. It's quite easy. If a plugin or feature changes its major version in your feature, then you should also increase your major version in your feature, and the same for minor and micro versions. And also here you get a suggestion what should be changed, and in this case you can see that a requirement has changed from version 2.05 to 2.1. And this is then reflected in the suggestion that you should upgrade from 2.1 to 2.2. Another quite useful feature is mainly for those that providing update sites, that you can now filter an update sites. Previously, you have actually two choices: include everything, that gives very, very big sites and duplicates a lot of stuff, or you can say only include what I have specified here, and we all know it's quite cumbersome to keep this up to date. So even if it works sometime, then on the next release, some user complains, I wanted to install, and the resolver or P2 complains, something is missing, can't be found. So that's, yeah, actually both choices are not very optimal. What is now available is that usually you have a target platform and then you define already where are the sources that I'm using to build, and these URLs are then inserted in your update site as a reference, and after that it will look through the list of items and filter out everything that is already available from your referenced sites. And this then results in an update site that is both very small and very fast to build, because you don't have to copy all the stuff, and still users can install from one URL without referencing any additional sites. Yeah. So what else has changed? Of course, internally a lot has changed in Tycho 4, but the most user visible one is maybe that POM declared dependency handling is updated. Before it was some intermediate way that you have to enable, yeah, if I define something in the POM, then you maybe consider it or even wrap it maybe or something like that. It was a bit confusing because sometimes Maven items are then overwritten by things from the target platform and so on. And this is now much more easier and intuitive, because if you define something in the POM, then first the target platform is asked, and if nothing is found there, then it automatically looks in the POM what you have defined there. Also, the Tycho build extension uses now the so-called Smart Builder. Smart Builder is something that works also for standard Maven projects, but with Tycho build extension it's now included by default, and the Smart Builder, from the name you maybe guess it, is very smart if you execute your build in a parallelized fashion, because it not only has a much better algorithm to find a way through your graph of projects to build, so it can find which project should I first build so that the overall build runs faster. It also gathers some information what is slowing down the build, and after the build you get, if your usage of the CPU is below a given threshold, or you enable debugging for this feature, you get a little report and it tells you these projects are currently hindering your build from running faster. Another thing that was recently added is that we are now also able to build standard OSGI repositories. I hope this will push this useful feature a bit and is actually an alternative to using the P2 format that is a bit Eclipse specific, and yeah, the OSGI repositories are just standardized, so it's more likely that you find tools supporting this. And also building multi-release jars is supported. For those who not know what a multi-release jar is, it simply allows you to replace classes in your jar depending on the Java version. And I'm sure you have heard one or another talk here about some cool preview features, and you maybe think, hey, I want to try this out, but wait, it could change in a later version, and maybe I don't want to raise my version yet to this Java 21 or whatever version where this is available. And this is where multi-release jars are useful for, because you can place code that is specific for a given Java release. And so, for example, if there's some cool new features that improve performance and you don't want your library users all to upgrade to this new Java version, you can provide an additional one and then simply say, if you run it with a more recent Java, you will get better speed, but for those who don't care or can't upgrade, you can still run this same jar on an older Java version. And of course, this also works if the API later changes, then you can just, for a newer version, adapt the API. So we are at the end. I'm not sure how much time is left, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or otherwise you can meet us at the BOF at Seminarräume 123 at 9:30, and I would be happy to answer any question or hear your ideas. Ed?
So I have two questions. One was that separating out the tests separately
Yeah, this is more that it's no longer needed that you use a special packaging type. You can just use Eclipse plugin as a packaging type. You don't need Eclipse test plugin, because with an Eclipse plugin you can now do everything you could previously do with Eclipse.
Useful. There's many cases where there are no extra dependencies.
Yes.
On the thing being tested, and then it's
So you still can use extra bundles for tests if it's useful, but you don't need anymore to use a special packaging type.
That was, we do not recommend to clutter your dependencies and put everything in a big black bundle thing where everything, especially with sample projects or.
With this baselining thing, if it says you have to do a major version increment, but I decided, like I marked the method deprecated to be this for 5 years, and now I am deleting it. I'm sure it still wants the major. How do you make it stop complaining?
Yeah, so the question is, even if I break the API, how can I shut down the complaint, shut up the complaint? So, of course, I won't recommend to do this, because this is very bad to your users. If you don't increment the major versions, they will think everything will remain. And if you tell them, yeah, there's an Eclipse rule, we are allowed to delete it after 2 years, then they probably won't be happy at all. But of course, it's possible to filter these things and say, okay, it is fine that this method is removed, and I still don't want to do a version bump. So if you like it and think it's fine, it's possible. It's similar to RP filters in PDE tools. Yeah?
Yes, currently with pomless Tycho build with test, I have with Tycho 3, I have some plugin test with different build configuration, and to be entirely pomless, I have a workaround to have a different deployment for test only, which, because I want to deploy my plugins but not my tests. And the workaround I have is to have separate executions in a profile based on a file which is there. And the profile detects that there is a file to execute or not some steps. Is there something changed regarding these aspects, or do we still have to use such workaround if we want to use different build configuration for test and non-test plugins? Not entirely Tycho pomless.
Yes, so the question is if you still need any workaround to separate your test code from Java code, if it's in the same bundle, or...
Regarding the execution,
that was not the question.
Regarding the plugin executions.
Question is that if you want to deploy, so if you call mvn deploy, and you want to exclude the test bundles from the deployment, if you use pomless, then...
Not specific of a deployment, but execute different plugins tasks, have different execution plugins for test and for non-test plugins. So currently using a profile.
Yes, you can of course configure this in the POM with different executions, but if you are using this new approach with a marked source test folder, then it will actually work like it's in Maven, where you have in source main and in source test folder. And this works exactly as in Maven now. Yeah.
The filtering of plugins in the update side for deduplicating content, is that optional? Is that on by default? Because sometimes you want to publish some artifact to your own update site and not rely on content of a dependent update site.
Yeah, that's configurable. You can.
Repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was if it is configurable, if items should be filtered or not, because sometimes you just want to mirror as much as possible and maybe don't want to be affected by failures of other update sites, for example, I think. And yeah, yes, this is possible. You can configure what, if you want to filter, yes, no. You can even configure what other sites should be include it. So you can say, I only want Eclipse, for example, as an included site, and everything at the moment is off by default. So if you don't change this, your build won't change, and it's just an option to enable.
What about the integration of code generators based on DSLs, let's say Xtext? Are they somehow integratable?
So the question is if you can include additional code generators like Xtext in the build, and yes, that's possible. That's also one advantage of the new structure, because you can, because it is now split into two phases, you can actually do, before the project resolves something, that generates, for example, even a manifest or some class files or whatever you like, and then the resolution phase starts, and this is now much more flexible. So previously it was a bit hard to do so, because the resolution started at the build before anything other from Maven could execute, so everything must be there before you actually start the build, and that's not very comfortable, and especially for code generators. And now with this two-phase resolve, you can use it much more flexible.
Even if the code generator itself is actually a Java application in the same monorepo?
You can. The question is if you can even execute a Java application, and yes, also that's possible. You can use the Maven exec plugin and bind it to the initialize phase of this project, and then you can execute any native code or any Java, anything you want.
It needs to be compiled first.
You can also have an additional compile phase in the initialize. You can do, actually with Maven, you can configure a lot of things. Of course, this will make your build a lot more complex and hard to read, but if it is a requirement, this would work.
You build something and execute it, and then
build again, yeah.
So you can build a generator that executes it.
Right. The only thing you need to consider is if you build it in the same build, that you must somehow ensure that it is, of course, executed before you execute your project that wants to use that builder. But you can have a dependency or something like that to ensure this, that the build order is correct in this case.
Okay.
Okay.